Hello, hello. Welcome back. How you doing there, friends? This is Virtual DEVintersection. My name is Jeff Fritz, and we're going to talk about some of the cool things that are going on Azure for developers with my guest, Paul Yuknewicz. Hey, Paul, it's good to see you.
Hey, Jeff. Good to see you, too. How are things going on the Philly main line?
Oh, my gosh. Things in Philly are fantastic. Look at it. And I'm still wearing my Captain Marvel hat. We did some marvelous things on Twitch earlier today, but you know what we're talking about Azure today. Give me 1 second.
Okay. Nice.
We need the Azure hat, right?
I need me one of those.
You need one of these? I can make that happen, my friend.
Thank you.
So, for folks who don't know who you are, can you give a quick rundown?
Sure.
Quick intro?
Yeah, I'm Paul Yuknewicz, a name with a lot of consonants, so you can call me Paul or Paul Yuck. That's what most people do. So my team is in the product team, and we work on a couple different things. I mean, mainly it's tools for Azure, and we work on tools in Visual Studio Code, even outside of Visual Studio, things like Storage Explorer. And we also work on Azure diagnostics. So we create some diagnostic services, and we partner with kind of the Azure monitoring folks and the Azure service folks to make our tools, really easy to use with those services.
Very
cool. At the conference, I'm pretty excited because I get to talk a little bit more about containers and microservices and diagnostics, which are kind of some of my favorite things.
Oh my gosh. Can we just check your headset there? It's getting crackly. I know it's a Bluetooth headset. Can you just check either disconnect it, reconnect it real quick? Sometimes that helps.
You want me to turn it off?
There we go.
Okay. That's a good plan.
Yeah.
It's my first time on Twitch. There had to be something, right?
Isn't it? Things like this always happen with with wireless things. They just get they get a little crispy sometimes. And I think your camera just froze.
Any better?
Try again.
See a difference? Hear a difference?
Yeah, that's better. There we go. How we doing, chat room? What do you think? Does that sound better? I see Wild Genie giving us some waving here and some hype. Manual rate engaged. I thought we should have rated over here. We should have gotten everybody joining us. There we go. I'm seeing folks in chat now. There we go. So you're really hitting on a lot of those cloud scale topics that when I think back to folks that were building and developing things in their own data centers, these were only dreams of being able to scale and have diagnostics across all the machines that make up my application and to be able to deploy containers and things quickly and easily. But now we can enable and we can do it in the cloud. So what kind of things, I mean, I know you're giving sessions around, things that developers need to know about these. Can we start with just containers here?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to maybe just take a peek, check out some of the things going on?
Absolutely. Do you have a screen share there we can hit?
Yeah, let's give it a shot here.
Alrighty. Look at this, friends. We're going to do the screen share. Let's see if this works.
Oh yeah.
We tested. We got this set up ahead of time. You got rated there. Boom, boom. Thank you so much. Paul is a little bit quieter than Jeff.
Okay.
I have levels on my side I can set. There we go. I see.
I'm
there
sharing
we go.
Something.
We've got it.
There we go. Do you see the portal?
I do. All right. Let's share this. There we go, friends. Now you can see what's going on here.
Is that clear enough for everyone, or is it kind of garbled?
Oh no, I think that's very clear for us. What do you say, chat room? How's it look? I'm waiting to hear some response. There we go. Better levels now on the audio. It looks good. Says, love to learn Alf says, looks good. Snoopaloopy says we're good to go. Yeah. Fonts are kind of small. We can fix that.
Yeah, we can fix that. Thanks for telling me though. That's what we need to know. Is that a bit better?
Yeah, I think that's good.
We'll keep just keep reminding me.
All right.
Can't really hurt my feelings. All right. So let's, if you don't mind, maybe we'll just start from Visual Studio.
Sure.
We could do like a lap around, but the interesting thing will be when you're thinking of questions and you want to talk about it.
Yeah.
All right, so let's just
absolutely. Chat room. If you have questions as we're going along here, let us know, and we'll interrupt and go through here. There's some questions if we can use the dark theme, if you don't mind.
Oh. Sure. Am I doing it the right way? Tools, options.
Yeah.
Environment, color theme blue. So we'll do dark. I guess this is better for your eyes, right?
It's better for the eyes, and it fits in well with the Twitch theme around the screen.
So I was basically brightening up the room.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, good call.
There we go.
All right. I have a look at that. Talk about classic. I've got my Windows Forms app, and I was doing a little bit of Office coding.
Nice.
Because I was talking to a developer just about how things work with Office and COM interop. So it's fun. Like you get to work on cloud and COM interop same day. All right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's a thing.
That's a thing. All right. So let's just maybe look at it with a simple web app, maybe a web API backend.
Okay.
And we'll check out some things. All right, so a couple ways I think about containers. You know, they really make, I think they help teams move faster. That's one of the best reasons to use containers. Also, you know, a container encapsulating your app and its dependencies, it makes it a lot safer and easier to port that same app onto any environment. You're going to have some confidence that it runs. So just kind of thinking from that mindset, we're going to make deployment faster. We're going to make dependencies a bit better. Let's kind of check that out. So when we were designing this, we wanted to make sure that you didn't need a lot of overhead to get into containers. And if you've been kind of following what we've done, we've changed this a bit over the last year. Love to hear if you like it or not. So you could take, you know, any app normally will run against something like IS Express or Kestrel on the local machine. Just a really lightweight environment. It's good for unit testing. You know, it's not quite production realistic, but that's okay because we're just coding. And from the same spirit, what we want to do is let you work against Docker. So what I could do is add Docker support. And I'm in .NET Core, and so you could do Linux or Windows. So I'm going to choose Linux. And what you got basically was a Docker file.
Okay. So, I mean, all you've done, file new, add container support. I mean, literally anybody could do this in any application.
Right. Any application. And one thing I like to do is I take existing apps, and you can do the same thing. Just add Docker support, and it really, it's not going to break your app. It's not going to add a lot of heavy stuff. We're adding a Docker file. And the Docker file here is saying, hey, I want to run inside of a base container that's from the Microsoft registry, and it's got ASP.NET pre-installed, Linux pre-installed. You know, it exposes the standard web ports. And, you know, a little bit of ninjutsu that we worked in, we automatically on your local machine can basically map the build output of your project folder into the container dynamically. So you don't have to rebuild a Docker container image over and over again, which could be, you know, kind of big, and that takes some time.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, so this is kind of a cool thing. This keeps it really lightweight, and as you keep changing your code, you hit F5, that kind of a thing, you keep rebuilding, it's just going to keep remapping that output into your container. It's just especially lightweight. But also, like, it's real too, because when you want to do real stuff, you know, you might want to have a real build, you might want to publish the container, basically to be ready to upload to a registry, and then finalize it. So we're going to make sure that there's no interstitial build output or, you know, tools thingies in the container. We're going to clean that all up and give you a nice pristine container in the end.
Yeah.
So these are
those publish
these are
lines.
Docker stages. Yeah.
Right. Those publish lines. That's the publish. That's the ASP.NET. Give me just the things to run this. Lines
Exactly.
there on
It's
14
almost
15.
This is a legacy thing. It's probably been around since, you know, terminology since 2005. But when we say publish in a build context, you're basically publishing the disk, right? You're creating the package that's ready to go. It's not quite the publish dialog. It's not the deploy. It's ready to go. And then you have that clean build output that you can throw in a registry. And that's what we want to do with containers. As you know, containers, they're not meant to be changed like a VM was, right? So if you want to make a change, you make a new container. You just make a new clean build. So we kind of set up that whole process, and a lot of talking, but very little work. We just add the Docker file. One other thing, Jeff, that we've been playing with is we have these debug targets, and so remember before we were running against IS Express, so we added a new one called Docker.
Okay.
And you can actually change this. So if you're like, no, I just want something quick, I don't need full containers, just keep running IS Express, and it kind of ignores and short circuits Docker. But when you want Docker, let's say like, hey, I want to run in the Docker environment and see how things change, make sure everything's kind of working, look at my environment variables. I do it this way. So let's give it a run. Now, and one thing, go ahead.
Well, sometimes when I've explained to folks about Docker, I've done the comparison that this file, the Docker file, is like making a cookie cutter. And you can stamp out instances of these. If you want to make something different, you need a new cookie cutter.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. It's a cookie cutter stamp that can stamp out these things. They're not meant to be changed, right? You kind of throw away the cookie cutter and you get a new one if you want a new one. And a good reason for that is, you remember like with VMs, just over time, just to keep them maintained, you would do all these things. You would hack at them, you'd patch them, and you had no idea like what state it was in anymore. And that's very counter to the philosophy with Docker. Docker, it's like I'm in a known state. I build to revise it. I build a new one. It's almost like my analogy that I like to use. It's kind of like an executable or a DLL. You don't go change executables or DLLs in memory. You just kind of build a new one. Yeah. And I think it's pretty similar if you think about it that way.
I'm going to interrupt you 1 second here. The headset is getting crackly. Can you try using just the microphone on your laptop there?
Let's do that. Yeah. I have a speaker in my room too. Let's try that. See if you guys like it better. Lots of devices here.
All right, are we still connected?
Yep, still connected. We can hear you.
Cool. That's actually cool because I think my ears are going down about 10 degrees. Taking that off.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, at this point, well, where were we? So we're talking about just the principles of what Docker does. So we created the image and we built, and I was getting a wonky error, and that happens to all of us. We'll turn this on and off again, just in case I was in a weird state.
Okay.
Are there any questions coming in while we're doing that?
Any questions, chat room, about using Docker, using it with Visual Studio? And this is Visual Studio 2019. We also have Docker containers for Visual Studio Code that are out there as well.
Yeah, and we work on those too. Curious if people are using VS Code or VS. So something that you're going to see with VS Code, we're going to create, like we have a Docker extension right now. So you go get the Docker extension, and then you go to the command palette and you type in Docker, and you can see a lot of things like add files from workspace. You can build, install, and run. And you can deploy to a registry. So you can do all the same scenarios. But in VS Code, we started the work early, and we took a dependency on Docker Compose. Compose is meant to run an orchestrator like Swarm, and so it's meant to have multiple containers. And let's say I wanted this web application and I wanted a database. Well, I would scaffold that out, and then there's a bit more orchestration that happens at runtime, where the containers have discovery. They can find each other. If you knock down a container, it spins right back up. So it's orchestrated, and which is really cool. But you don't always need that heavy weight just to like work on one service, one microservice. That might be a bit too much.
For sure.
So we're going to do the same thing in VS Code, and you're going to see it soon. where you can kind of add the Docker support just for single service, and then separately.
Oh, let me hide my cameras there. There we go.
Yeah, you can add orchestration. So I just went right-click, add orchestration, and this is complementary. So I could target Kubernetes, Service Fabric, Docker Compose, and I can still compose up the application, and I can kind of like opt into that complexity if I want it.
Oh.
So we made it a little bit more progressive, and I'd love to hear if this matches what you all do. But we hear that a lot of times as developers, we're working on, maybe one service at a time, one service in dependencies, and someone else on the team is thinking about stitching all the services together to be a big application. So like the concerns that would be handled by Docker Compose might be handled by someone else.
So chat room, Paul's got a good question there for you. For those folks that are using Docker, do you have one person who does the compose all the services, or does everybody compose and run Docker Compose every time for the entire solution? So tell you what, show me a 1 in the chat room if somebody else does the assembly of the entire solution. Drop a 1 in the chat room if that happens. If it's everybody does the contribution every time and manages the Docker Compose and runs it, do me a favor, for everybody, drop an E in the chat room so we can see the difference between the two popping up there. Nobody's writing anything. Everybody's asleep.
It's early.
It's not early, West Coast.
I'm sipping on coffee. This is cool.
There you go. So everybody does it for hit-faced. Okay, if it's just one person and it's not you, yeah, everybody does it for I'm not myself. No, stop sleeping, Shooky, and oh my goodness. I have a extension that I've been using on some of the channels here that'll show chat highlights pop up over here. Lunchtime for folks on the East Coast, says Desert Griffin. So it looks like a couple folks are saying that everybody does it on their team. Everybody will compose and run the entire solution. Okay,
well, it's good to hear. So, well, you totally have that option.
Absolutely.
So I guess then the next question is, did we oversimplify things? By the way, while we're talking, I'm troubleshooting my Docker rig real quick.
Sure. Shookian says their team hasn't quite made it to containers yet, but they're working to make it happen. That's a pretty good point. Containers is for some folks, it's an architecture jump that you need to make, right?
Yeah, it's an architecture jump, and I think it really does change your DevOps, a bit. So it changes your workflow as well. Let's see if that fixed it. Get a bit further. So what I just did, the error message said, and this is actually kind of a good thing to talk about. The error message said that the drive sharing might be having a problem. So Docker on your machine is running inside of a VM, and it needs access to the file system because, like we said, we're building in kind of the host machine. We're building your application binaries, and then we're going to sideload those into the container.
Okay.
And that's done through drive sharing. Actually, believe it or not, it uses Samba, which is kind of interesting.
Oh my gosh, there's the technology from a long time.
But now we're modernizing it. We're going to use Hyper-V.
Okay.
Hyper-V drives. But that said, so if that connection is broken, you're going to see wonky behavior on your dev box.
Okay.
And 9 times out of 10, all you need to do is just reestablish the drive sharing and type in your password and try not to leak your secrets while you do it. And then you're right as rain after you do that. So Jeff, there's one other thing I really want to show you because this is brand new.
Yeah.
We've been working on this Docker extension, and it creates this containers window, and we have one of these.
Oh wow!
Yes, in VS Code. Couple things you can do with this one. So we'll show you all of the containers that are available and running on your machine, and you can see the state. Are they running? Are they stopped? You can, you could even shoot one down if you wanted to, which is kind of handy. So you can do a couple like little maintenance things.
Very handy. Yeah.
And then we built this, I would say, with diagnostics in mind. Like, what are some of the things on, let's say, day 10 when you're working with containers that could be biting you, and you can kind of fix it. One is we hear that people are having a hard time finding out what their environment variables are set to in the container. So we have a little explorer.
Oh, nice.
Right. So like, let's say you had a port mismatch. You're like, am I getting the right port open? Well, you can see it. Same thing. Am I running the version of ASP.NET Core that I thought? Yep, here it is. My path's right. So stuff like that. Another thing is we actually just give you the logs from Docker. So the Docker logs are invaluable because you get standard out from the app. But even if you have, let's say, a startup failure, so let's say .NET.exe is going to run, and then it's going to run your app, and somewhere in there, .NET is going to crash. You would actually see that error right here in the logs. Let's say, I set my connection string to something that could never work. That could cause a startup failure. I'm just going to get that right here. So you can fix those things. And this is my most favorite. You get a file explorer.
Oh.
Files on disk.
I didn't know this was in there. Holy crow.
Yeah, man. So it's pretty cool. So you can
you're literally mounting it like a virtual machine that you can browse around, even though it's that sealed container.
Yeah, it's sealed, but you can still see what's inside it. And this is really huge. Like, I don't know about you, but you're kind of like, why is this file not found?
Yeah.
Why are my debug symbols still there? Like, and you can actually inspect as you're building. And, so here I can kind of compare to my Docker file. It just helps troubleshoot a lot more. Like if I'm adding dependencies, I can see if those dependencies actually got installed. So, we're kind of excited about some things that we're going to add. We're hoping to add remote containers, so I could, look at a remote location and see those. Also, I mentioned once you create an image, you put it in the registry. So what if you could see your containers in the registry as well?
Oh, yeah.
So just stuff we're thinking about.
So now this is the latest version of the Docker extension for Visual Studio?
Yeah, it's the latest version of Docker extension. In 16.3, you're just going to need to go to the extension gallery and just go get it. Just, search on Docker or search on containers, and you'll find it pretty quick. Let me pull it up. Should be there.
Docker Container Tools Extensions.
Oh, yes. I didn't even recognize. I was looking for Docker. But yes, that is it. Docker, yeah. Container Tools Extension. So you want this one. And once you get 16.4, it'll just be built in, because we feel like it's ready to ship.
Okay. And Container Tools Extensions. I'm going to grab the link there and share it in the chat room real quick.
Cool. Yeah, I think you can get it from VS Marketplace also.
Yep, there it is. There's the link to the marketplace for you in the chat room if you're interested in checking that out. Very cool. Yeah, I got to make sure I get the latest copy of that and give that a try, because there's a lot that feels like it would clean up for the interactions that you're doing in Visual Studio with containers that I'm typically doing at the command line, and I'm bouncing back and forth. Oh, I've got to restart the container. And now to be able to do it all locally, holy crow.
Yep. It's actually interesting. There's a pretty healthy ecosystem of other things too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, so that was the most simple kind of a Docker piece. Another thing that I usually like to think about is testing. So one interesting thing you can do is you can run MS Build style tests as another stage. Let's say I would make an as test, and then I could run my unit test project, or I could run the kind of tests I like. Let's say N unit, X unit, those kinds of things.
Sure.
I believe that containers go super well with a pipeline, CI/CD.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's just good that every time you build, you create an image, you test it out a bit, and then when it's ready to go, you can push it.
So, okay, if I were to add a test section in here, and I'm going to run .NET test, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the next line after .NET build there, right? If I inserted there on line 13, run .NET test, and I point to my test project and tell it, run this.
Yep.
If this was in an Azure pipeline, how do I get those test results out? And will Docker stop properly for me if a test fails?
Yeah, it will. Like the Docker build will actually, if a test stage fails and if .NET test fails,
yeah,
the Docker build will fail, and it'll fail telling you the output of what the test failed on.
Okay.
You could probably, I don't know if we have enough time, but we could mess around and play with that. Let's just see if it's easy.
We could trial and error test and figure out, tinker with that, and see if we can find a solution to adequately demonstrate. Not play with.
Be the unit.
N unit, X unit, take your pick. Sure.
There's kind of the newer one and the existing one. So. Right. So here, there's an assert pass. You could assert a fail, and I should get a test explorer, right?
Yep, there you go.
So I have to build it.
Build started, and building the container.
Yep. Gotta love these names.
So.
UNF.
Yeah. So when you added that test project in, did it add it into the Docker Compose or into the Docker file automatically for you?
It didn't. I mean, it's part of my build process, but I could containerize this and add this as a container as well. I don't need to, but I absolutely could.
Okay.
Let's see.
Let me hide our cameras there so folks can see behind us. So you right-clicked on the test project, or did you?
I right-clicked on the test project and I just added Docker support there. So if I actually wanted a container just for my tests, I could totally do that, and then I'd have to. I would just have to reference, the output of the other project as the thing I'm testing. But another way, I mean, you could just safely do this as a part of the build. Like, you don't have to include it as a container.
Sure.
So here, right, you can run.
So, okay, and
Past. Now, if we remind me, Jeff, what the test is. Okay.
Right. So, when you're running it in Test Explorer, it's just running on the local disk. Right? It's not actually part of the build process. The part of the Docker build process.
Right. Not yet.
Yeah, but we're just proving that it is.
Now we're into the build, and
I think it's assert fail you want.
Oh yeah, assert fail. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I haven't had my coffee today. And I failed on the fail. That's awesome. We do it just with.
Yep, no arguments. Arguments would report a reason why it failed. Cool. Build succeeded, and executing tests. There they are. I love that it executes tests automatically for you when you finish building the application.
Yes, and then I think we need to add a stage that actually triggers the test, right? Like you said, we need to run
in the Docker file. Right. So after that .NET build, it also needs to copy in the test project. Right, which it's not doing there. Like I'm looking at line 8 and line 9 right now. Right, are just copying in the CS proj for the web application. You would need to also copy in the content for the test project and then run .NET test against that project.
Yep.
So
let's just do a little hacking here. That's overboard, but is that what we do? .NET test?
And you could drop the .NET publish.
You want to drop it?
Line 15 is what I was looking at.
I see what you mean. Yep, copy and paste. Goodness, as we're hacking.
But you want to run .NET test against the other project. Is the other project file out there?
Oh yeah, we probably actually, what I want to do is actually run it from the other context, or I want to refer to it here. You're right. I could do it. Or in the context of, yeah, you're right.
So you're going to add Docker support to that project.
Right, because we're just running hooked up quickly, right?
Yep.
Oh, that's going to start this project.
Start the web project.
Yeah, we got to change that.
And
don't you love it when you want it to fail and it keeps working? I hate that.
Gosh. Okay. Yeah, now it'll run that one. And yeah, so you're running .NET test in the middle of that file. So it should run. It's awful when things just work. Don't they, Electric Havoc?
No.
Oh. So it's building the test project. So in this way, I mean, it's building and you're getting the same middle containers, right? The stage steps in the containers. But you're going to kick off that test project and actually run the test.
Yes.
There it goes. So you should have a failure there reported somewhere, right? Exited with code 0.
Well, that's probably the case too, because it's just a class file. I think I haven't hooked it up quite right yet. So build as test. I need to be.
We don't need the publish.
It's from build, so it's from an SD. It needs to have the SDK there, which because it's from build, that should be there.
Mm-hmm.
It's also built the binaries. .at execode build 0. Swallow the build.
In the chat room, Gooseman1537. This is Visual Studio 2019 that Paul's working with. If you wanted to work with Python with Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio, you need to download those tools appropriately so that you can work with that language if you want to use that.
Right. We're working on making our Docker tools really awesome in Visual Studio Code. Right now, they're working pretty well for .NET and for Node, and Python is pretty much next on the list. So there's some basic support, but there's more we want to do. But definitely for VS Code, go ahead and grab the Docker extension, make sure you have the Python extension, and then just keep an eye out. Maybe we'll come back and we'll show Python support when that's running well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have Python, I have Docker, but like I said, there's more to do to add the functionality that made it up to speed with what we just saw in Visual Studio for Python.
Cool.
All right. I'm going to have to check my notes. Maybe it'll come to me. There's a hookup I need to do to copy and get this running and failing. This is the general idea.
Yeah, I don't think you want to do the build, publish, or the base final stuff. I think you want to stop with running the test there. Everything after that, yeah, we don't need.
Well, it's a stage, so it'll run the stage.
Oh.
And then it'll move on. It'll kind of throw out the stage and move on to this one. But what you want to do is actually have the build fail at a stage, and then you know that the test stage failed.
So
anyway,
so the container isn't even available.
Right. Yeah. I'll come back and I'll post what the right answer is to this after.
Cool.
Oh, but that reminds me one thing. If I were to troubleshoot this, at least I can get back to something I want to talk about. So we go back to the Docker file, and then where's my container window? There we go. So we see which one we've been working on, Bold Nightingale. This is also really slick. So if you wanted to, let's say, run .NET Test inside the container,
yeah,
and terminal, and
now you're inside.
Yeah,
you're inside the machine, man. Okay, that's pretty cool.
So this I'm already diagnosing something. I probably didn't inherit from the right base because it's complaining that it didn't find the SDK. So actually, we already solved one of the problems. But yeah, so you can kind of see how the tooling helps you diagnose and troubleshoot a bit.
Well, right, the published one that it releases there, right? If we go back to your Docker file, the final one,
the final one didn't have the SDK. You're right.
Yeah. So you could change the container image so it pulls and it includes the SDK if you wanted.
Yeah, so if it's from build has the SDK, right? No, right.
There we go.
Okay.
So now you can step in and actually run that .NET test.
I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah, where's it? It's dropping somewhere in there. Now, the nicknames of base, build, and final, are those important? Does Docker actually look at that for something? Is that presented to you in some way?
Not really. They're kind of your names to keep track of things.
Okay.
But as you can tell, we, when we would say from build, we set up our own little inheritance chain. So it's like your naming can flow all the way through. But I don't, there's not really a convention you have to follow.
Okay, hang on. So you're building the project there, and go back to the code. You're copying in the files a second time with that copy ... right, on line 13. I don't think you need to copy them a second time. I think you could continue right after that .NET build right into .NET test.
To do this one. By the way, like casing and spaces and tabs matter.
Yeah, that's definitely a catch that we need. And I noticed that you have syntax assistance for the Docker file.
Yeah, it's pretty lightweight.
Still not catching that error.
I'm not happy with this. There's something fundamental I'm missing. let's come back to it.
Okay, that's fine.
So don't keep fumbling on that one.
But definitely something to.
I have a doc. Yeah.
This is the right person to talk to that can help make that easier. So maybe entry point. The goal, Wild Genie, in the chat room is that during the build process, the build of the container fails, and it doesn't get all the way to the point where it publishes because the tests are inadequate. The tests fail. So there's definitely something there that should make this a heck of a lot easier.
Okay, so what I did here, this is my public GitHub, and when I saved a project that shows how to kind of set a way to set this up, and here we set the working dir, the build. So setting the working dir to /app, because probably maybe it's not finding the test to run.
Well, you're not even getting that error being reported.
Yeah, you're right. And it cascade inherits from publish. Publish comes from build. Build has the SDK. It also did a restore on the test. I just can't resist. It's bugging me. You ever get that way?
Oh, I know that feeling.
All right, we'll give it one more try, and then I'll just have to eat crow after that.
Taking a look here. Yeah.
That didn't work for you, did it?
No.
All right, well, let's keep going.
Okay. So, I mean, right, this is a thing of getting the test buried in there, loaded in there, but the next steps, you've shown there's ways to set this up so that it can automatically, and you put Docker Compose in there, but you can also do Kubernetes, and there's this other thing, dev spaces.
Yeah, dev spaces. That's a whole thing. So if we, let's look at something a little bit more. Let's kind of start over for that one.
Okay.
So let's say I've got a couple microservices. I've got a front end.
Okay. You have a front end, an API.
API sounds good.
All right. Yeah, you're seeing, chat room, you are seeing just a slight bit of lag there in some of the audio. There was a little bit of a network hiccup.
Okay. Still incredibly simple, but a little bit more interesting. It's good to have a couple. If we're going to use Kubernetes and dev spaces, it would make more sense to have a couple services. So now let's get this ready for kube. So this time we'll say, I mean, you could always add Docker support, but you can go straight to add orchestration support. We'll pick Kubernetes Helm. We scaffold the Helm charts that are also needed to deploy the front end to Kubernetes, and you have parameters and values that you can use. again, Kubernetes is going to provide orchestration, and it's going to provide some other services like service discovery. So I'm going to do the same thing to all services.
All right, so I'm not familiar with what Helm charts are. I know I've heard the word Kubernetes. I know that it's a way for you to set up a bunch of containers so that they know to start and stop and transition processes back and forth. And you can deploy into a cluster. And just like we used to do with physical machines, it knows how to go up and down. What are Helm charts?
Yeah, Helm chart, a couple ways that I think about. One is it simplifies deploying a Kubernetes-based service. So like Kubernetes needs a manifest to describe what's being deployed to it. And Helm really simplifies that. It's kind of it provides an abstraction over that. And additionally, you could almost think of Helm like a package manager, because you can install additional software in your cluster. Let's say I want a Redis cache. There's a chart that's predefined for Redis cache. You drop it in, and now you can deploy Redis cache. So it just makes it's kind of like a package manager is. You can make it really easy to deploy software, whether it's your custom code or whether it's kind of like off the shelf, open source that the ecosystem uses.
Oh, very nice.
It just simplifies things. Kubernetes, it's a lot of YAML, right? And so it's a bit less YAML to work with Helm. And so, between Azure AKS, which is a Kubernetes service, and our team, we've leaned into using Helm because we believe it does simplify things. You don't have to use it.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But it makes it easier. So at this point, we scaffolded the Helm charts. And so let's talk about Azure Dev Spaces. Azure Dev Spaces makes it really easy for a team of people to dev and test in Kubernetes, kind of in a distributed way. So like what I've seen, once you have a very complex distributed app set of services, one team might work on one service at a time. One developer might work on one service at a time. But to pull all those services down and try to run them, let's say, on your machine, or to push your service up and try to do like a dark deployment where your service is available. You want all other services to be used because that's the LKG. But when it's time to use your service, you kind of want to route to your service because it's your flight, right? It's your new deployment. That's really tricky, and it's really like dev teams spend a lot of time trying to make that work. So what Dev Spaces does, it gives you these quote spaces, kind of like having your own developer namespace that automatically handles the routing, right? So that, let's say, backend is what I'm responsible for and what I'm working on. So I'm working on backend. I can kind of, Dev Spaces will automatically set up a route that when we go to the URL in the cluster, it's going to use the common front end, but it's going to use my new version of the backend that I'm just developing against and handle that whole hookup. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. It makes a lot of sense. And right, I'm learning how to piece these things together, and yeah, you're helping clarify here a bit.
Cool. Let's we can take a little peek at this, right? So I have.
Yes, please.
The one thing you noticed that, I talked before about debug targets. When Visual Studio sees you're working in Kubernetes, it automatically offers to run your solution. It just like even F5 will run actually in Kubernetes using Dev Spaces. So F5 is in fact doing a push. It's doing a Helm push. And it's setting up the space and it's setting up the routing so that, traffic will be routed to my new service. So here I can see that I have Dev Spaces set up. And so I have my Kubernetes cluster. Right now it's called bike sharing. And there's a default space. So like we talked about this LKG, like the one for the team, that might be your default namespace that everyone's going into.
Okay.
But I can create a new space. Just imagine it's called Paul Yuck. Right. So in this space, anything that I deploy, like let's say the backend, that's going to be grafted over the rest of the namespace. So when I'm using this namespace, it inherits the default namespace but overrides with my service.
Okay. So, all right, let me see what that looks like.
Yeah, I need to go set this up.
Out on your Azure
Pleasantly
service.
surprised me by bringing up dev spaces. I have to make sure my cluster is in the state that I can do that. Let's just take a peek. We're going off the rails, but in the cool
Very
way.
far off the rails. Oh yeah, that's okay.
Right.
We're figuring it out.
So let's go to Kubernetes. We have bike sharing. This is kind of handy. I mean, there's a lot of monitoring and logs built in, and you can even get to the Kubernetes intrinsic dashboard.
The same dashboard if I was running it locally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just see if my terminal's set up.
Now, for your sessions during the DEVintersection event, of course, you've got all this information, a whole lot more about all the different things that you're working on with cloud native development out on Azure. There is a workshop for cloud native development that our friends Brady Gaster and Glenn Condren are working on. But if folks need just give them the lowdown, get in, get started. There's all kind. You have a couple hours worth of sessions on this.
I do, yeah. So we have. I'm doing one with Glenn too, just on how to use microservices with .NET. And then we have a session that's basically like the 5 services that we think everyone needs to use in Azure.
Sure.
It's our opinion of what those are. That's a great getting started one. And then we have another one around diagnosing and troubleshooting cloud apps.
Okay. Yeah, we're actually just about at an hour here, and
oh, wow.
Oh yeah, that was quick. Coding live and solving problems makes time fly.
Okay.
So inside your container, you paused execution when you click the screen. Is the feedback I'm getting in chat.
What did I do?
On your console.
Uh-huh.
You paused execution by clicking the screen.
Paused execution of what? Sorry.
Paused it, right? You know how if you click the screen, if you highlight text, it freezes the console.
Oh, yeah. This console we're talking about?
Yeah, yeah. Hit escape. See how the cursor's there?
Okay. This part did what I wanted, because what we're doing here is we're loading. We started the Kubernetes has a built-in service, which is the portal kind of console, and so it started that on localhost in this port, and now we're tunneling into that, and this is giving us a view over our cluster. And I think what I'm just trying to show is that we have this default namespace, and then when we deploy, we'd create the Paul Yuck namespace, and that would have an overlay of the default services plus any new service that I create. And so that's essentially what Dev Spaces is setting up. It's setting up my own space to play as a developer that won't impact the rest of my team.
Nice.
And that, when you have a big distributed app, or when you're doing dev and test, it really helps to have that safe space, right, to do your work before you commit it back to master and commit it to, the main kind of branch in the main run environment.
Okay. Very cool.
So yeah, you mentioned we're limited on time. I don't know if there's anything else you want to close on, or.
So I mean, right? If I go back over, let's go back to our screen over here. So there's a lot going on there with new tools that are available for folks for using containers, both in Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. Real easy to deploy and push that stuff out to Azure if you want to be able to work out there. and take advantage of the features. Dev spaces, so you can run Kubernetes, share it with your work as a whole out there, yourself out there, or deploy and share with your team. Lots of different options there. I know we didn't get into diagnostics, and that was something that you had mentioned is a big thing for folks.
It is, yeah. It's a whole topic. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we'll definitely talk a lot about it in my session. Okay. I think a lot of diagnostics starts with metrics and logs. If I were just to bottom line it, that's a lot of our world, and we've been working at making sure the right metrics and logs are showing up for .NET and for containers, and for the other languages. And we even have these things called detectors. So if you go to diagnose and solve problems in the Azure portal, you're always going to see a diagnose and solve problems. And this is super handy because it's kind of like a bot that looks at your metrics and finds common problems, like if your app is down, if your nodes aren't healthy or aren't ready. So I would definitely check that out. And I'm going to drill into all kinds of things there in a second. And then, I'll call that the standard line of defense. And when those defenses fail, we can do some really crazy stuff. Like we can do debugging in a safe way for production with Snapshot Debugger. We can do some profiling for performance, which is also safe and gives you like byte level timings to understand where your hotspots are. So those are just a bunch of tools you can put in your tool belt.
Very cool. Yeah, because there's so many things that could be happening out there that you can't physically see because it's in the cloud.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can't see it, and debugging is almost like a dirty little word in the cloud. We try to do as much as we can with metrics and logs, right? But there are times where, let's say you have async issues or deadlocks, or you just need to understand the local variables to understand what the context was, or you have a memory leak. Yeah. Like those are the kinds of things you pretty much need a core dump to debug to find them. And so, we do have some, you can almost think of it as like a break the glass. You can break the glass and get some of those tools and go fix it.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
So, all right.
But 90% of the time, you shouldn't need to do that.
No. Cool. Well, that was great stuff, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Jeff.
And I definitely want to have you back as we're on my channel, because we're getting really close to wanting to cluster some of the features and things that I'm building over there. And I would love to get your insight and get a hand setting that up for deployment to Azure.
That'd be really fun. I'd love to work with you on that.
Cool.
Make it happen.
Yeah, we'll make that happen. So, friends out there that are watching in the chat room, we are about, 4 weeks? 4 weeks away from the conference. We have one more show next week. It happens to be, Paul, it's on Halloween.
Oh, don't we know it? My kids are.
Yeah.
They're gonna go trick or treating, but I'm paying for this a little bit early.
So we're gonna have a little bit of fun here.
Good.
Richard Campbell will be back. My guests will be Robert Green and Michelle Bustamante, and we're gonna have a Halloween spectacular here on the channel. Thank you, friends, for joining us. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna take a quick peek and see if there's anybody hanging out there that we should raid real quick. Is there somewhere folks should go to get more documentation about what's going on with dev spaces and native development with Visual Studio?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I have an easy ACA link, but let's see.
And I'll show your screen there when you get to.
Yeah, this is where I would start. You just use a search engine, and I went to Azure, and this is pretty good because like conceptually, we can explain the model. Like if you have a bunch of services, and let's say here Susie's the developer, and she wants to have her own version of a service amongst the others, and just through routing, the right route will be taken for her service to be called amongst other services. So it kind of explains conceptually what's going on. And then we've got some nice quick services against real GitHub projects with microservices where you just get up and going and try out dev spaces. And then, I would recommend really look at the testing functionality, because you can really use this for testing right away. Like, hey, I want to test my own deployment of my own service against everything else. Super handy for that.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. Thanks so much, Paul. And we're going to set up and raid the Visual Studio channel. They are over there. It looks like they're in the middle of doing their Windows desktop stand up over there. So we're going to set up and send all of our friends over there. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Really appreciate it. We'll see you next week for the Halloween show. Catch you later, Paul. You have a good one.
Later. You too. Take care.
All right. Have fun with Visual Studio, friends. See ya.